trying to get you folks to understand this is how the smoke and mirrors works. I just simply want to find out what happened to the American dream as someone who is living the American nightmare. You got to know the facts, and if we came together, we could overcome the corruption that's murdering us all.
I'm just trying to make the world aware of the truth, and I've got it.
Hey world, my name is Patrick Lovell, and it's February 11th, 8:38 a.m. where I live, and I'm going to rip some truth bombs because I think millions of you are desperate to understand how this world works, but you have no idea how it works. Everyone seems to think that they understand the system is rigged. Everyone likes to proclaim that the system is corrupt, but nobody understands the details of why the system is corrupt and who has done what, when, and how, and who covered it up to enable the system that we're all under the thumb of. And I'm going to try to enlighten you in a very brief period of time because I know you all have more important things to do, like watch the hot chick do her karaoke on TikTok or some badass fraternity guy that slugs a couple of bottles of tequila and pukes all over the fucking place, because that's a lot of fun to watch. But meanwhile, our entire country is a train wreck, and this is the reason why. So we have a thing called the central bank. It's the Federal Reserve. It's supposed to operate with absolute professionalism and integrity. And the current president of the Federal Reserve, chairman of the Federal Reserve, I should say, and the head of the Dallas Fed are guilty of insider trading, among other things. So if you have guys that are in charge of the entire money supply to the world and they're insider trading, what do you think that means? So let's go back to the beginning. Everything that's happening now, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Joe Biden and the Wall Street blue Dems that happen to be puppeteered by Wall Street, are all playing for the same team. And they all are having us wanting to murder each other on the streets so that they can create and continue to control the levers of power for themselves at everybody else's expense. I'm not expendable. Chances are you're not either. In 2008, we had a global meltdown that took out hundreds of millions of people around the world and led to tragedy that was insane. It was not a natural disaster. It didn't happen because of market forces. It was completely engineered through a criminal racketeering enterprise that was structured at every step of the way to create an incredible machine of deception that sold illegal loans to people that didn't understand what they were getting into, and then also to investors around the world that were buying into investments that weren't what they claimed to be. That's called illegal reps and warranties. And it's a felony, a massive, massive criminal felony when that happens, to the point that anybody that's engaged with that, and I'm talking about large investment banks, need to be dismantled, their leadership thrown in prison, and their bonuses clawed back, and then replaced with people that will do the job the way the job is designed to function. Once again, going back to the Federal Reserve, when you have the chair of the Federal Reserve and one of its affiliates, affiliate banks, insider trading, we've got a massive problem. Now, on top of that, there's a company many of you guys are probably aware of at this point because it just comes in and out of media and out of other people's mouths, but you don't know who they are. It's called Blackrock. Blackrock was managing Jerome Powell's investments. That's a massive conflict of interest. And that's a problem when you understand who Blackrock is in the matrix of the Federal Reserve. So in 2008, when I had mentioned that there was a massive criminal enterprise underway, the whole idea was to target African American widows first who had equity in their homes, to set them up to steal their houses and make a lot of money in the process. Then they got the entire world. But on the other side of that, so you start with African Americans that were targeted, and not just the widows who had equity in their houses, but ultimately professionals, doctors, people that lived within the Beltway, that sort of thing. They were targeted as well through predatory loans. What are predatory loans? Those are loans that lenders and marketers and brokers, I should say, are providing to people and alternatives with what we call asymmetric information, which is they're hiding what is going to happen on the back end. A lot of this was baked into, loans on certain terms that were, completely inverse perverse of what the people were signing thought that they actually were. And most of the times they were baked into terms that were going to blow up an increasing interest downstream that people weren't aware of, that ultimately they would have to refinance. And then suddenly there was a time that came when none of them could refinance. And so therefore they ultimately went into foreclosure and lost their homes. But all of this was built on illegal documentation, fraudulent paperwork. The FCIC, which is the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission, learned in 2012 that 60% of the vintage loans that took place between 2004 and 2006 were liar's loans. That meant that they were called ninja loans, actually, no income, no asset. So we were loaning hundreds of thousands of dollars for houses that weren't worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who had no income or no assets to be able to pay those loans back. So why would they loan to that type of customer? Because they weren't on the hook. The people lending the money weren't on the hook for how those loans would function. The whole idea was to be able to move those loans through the pipeline all the way through the system. And there's different stopgaps, such as underwriters and credit rating agencies that are there to make sure that loans are done properly so that the people that are actually borrowing money could pay those loans back. Because if you're lending somebody money and you're on the hook for that, you want to get that money back. And by the way you make sure you can hedge your bet is if they have an asset and collateral that's actually something that in the event that they can't pay the loan back, that you can take back that has value. That's the idea of lending. But in this particular case, it wasn't just that. The loans were securitized and bundled into mortgage-backed securities that later then turned into derivatives of all sorts, collateralized obligations such as credit default swaps or collateralized obligations and CDO squares, and a whole potpourri of so-called complicated financial instruments that really aren't financial. They're just murky and opaque for a reason, so that people that are handling them or buying them or selling them really don't know what they're made up of. The whole idea is to just sell them and sell them quickly based on the appraisal of what those assets are worth, which a lot of time was hyper increased, because that gave the bigger package more value, and that made a lot of the middlemen who were trading on fees the incentive and obviously the intent to move those loans along. And then eventually, because people couldn't afford to pay those back because they were the wrong borrowers, because we had actually killed the golden goose and we didn't have a society of people whose income increased with the presumed increase in the housing values, that everything collapsed like a house of cards. And when it collapsed, by the way, the ones that had collapsed on the hardest were the ones that got predated upon with these illegal loans, and then also pensioners. So the working class amongst us, those that work in the factories, those that are teachers, those that are laborers such as pipe fitters, and just salt of the earth type of people just doing a job, trying to save money, trying to get their kids through college to get a better life than they did, and hopefully own a home that could increase in value, because that's called the American dream. You put money away, you manage your finances, and then hopefully it grows in time because the whole system is improving, because we are a society that actually, does the right thing. That's what we used to be to a degree, and much more so than now. But that all ended. That all ended with financialization. It's the back end of what we call neoliberalism, which basically killed the golden goose. We sent manufacturing over to Asia. We bought most of our fossil fuels from the Middle East. and we were a nation of middlemen. And same with the UK and other big financial ports around this world. But they were making money on the deal. And ultimately, when it all blew up, the people that blew it up were insulated by the legal system, and they were also insulated by those that are supposed to investigate this criminality because their political system is that corrupt. Because at the end of the day, Jerome Powell and the likes of the Federal Reserve can actually print as much money as they want to get into the system that goes through the hands of the people that created this massive grift to begin with. And at the same time, what that means is you have 0% interest going to the asset managers and all the hedge funds and the security, the private equity bunch and all of the people that make money and launder debt, basically, is what it comes down to. And then they put it into securities based on supposed products that turned out to be, zombie companies and a whole lot of, sawdust, if you want to know the truth, that then the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government is buying back through quantitative easing, and they're toxic assets. So the Federal Reserve was both supply and demand, and so everything else is a myth. The law isn't equal. The law doesn't punish those above the line who are completely corrupt and destroying us, because they are paying the politicians who have the authority to prevent investigations from our institutions like the FBI and the DOJ and the attorneys generals around the country, as well as many other agencies that are tasked to prevent this sort of thing from happening. We learned these lessons that after the Great Depression, and then we created new rules and regulations to make sure that would never happen again. After World War II, we had the greatest growth in the history of the world to the middle class, and then we started dismantling all of those things, starting with Ronald Reagan, and went on overdrive during the Clinton administration, and Obama was there to clean it up, which brings me full circle to this moment. Obama was the man who was sold to us as change we could believe in, that would represent the American people to get us back to a country of by and for the people. That was a lie. Obama covered for Wall Street. He was their bagman. And now, this many years later, everything that took place at that time period shape-shifted the world that enabled Donald Trump and MAGA. Now, incidentally, when I gave you that analogy, that there was predation that targeted African Americans, they also targeted the white working class. So if you want to know the truth, everything that constitutes probably the core and the soul of Black Lives Matter and MAGA, they both got screwed by this monstrous machine that I'm describing to you. They're stealing from everybody. It's all a lie. The big lie that manifested through Trump is a part of this. Donald Trump had a company called Trump Mortgages. All of the mortgage lenders, the shadow lenders that we call them, the AmeriQuest, the Countrywides, the Nationwide, the Nation Stars, and many others, Green Points and so forth, they were all involved with liar's loans. They were all involved with documentation fabrication to get loans approved through the system, and Donald Trump was one of them. You think he came up with this idea for documentation fabrication for election certification on his own? Donald Trump eats fast food and watches All-Star Wrestling. Do you think it could have occurred to him? Oh man, my brokers were lying, stealing, and cheating and getting these loans approved, and we made millions of dollars in the process. Hey guys, I've got an idea about the election. That's the back end of this ridiculousness. I swear to God, this is what's happening right before our eyes. The Wall Street meritocratic Dems, who are paid by the Wall Street machine, who gets its money for free from the Federal Reserve, and they can lock and load on the Democratic Party, and who's covered for them. When that whole house of cards fell and everybody around the country were like, wait a second, this system's rigged. I'm not going down that road again. I'm not going to play ball with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is the one who was part of the system that got us to where we are. Hey, let's give this guy, Donald Trump, a chance. So I've heard it said before, and I actually just heard this from Joe Rogan on a mashup someone put together in response to his N-word mashup, where he said, not all Trump supporters are racist, but all racists are Trump supporters. So now you've got this race to the bottom, train wreck America that is just lying in every single direction, pointing the fingers at everybody else, and everybody wants to hate the other guy, especially if he doesn't belong to your church, or if he doesn't listen to your music, or if he doesn't go to your club, or whatever the case is in our tribalism. All of us have been under the thumb of this situation for 4 decades, and it's blown up in our face, and this is rock bottom. And by the way, this is history. This is exactly what happened after World War I that led to all of the craziness around the world, that led to Hitler's fascism in Nazi Germany, and also into communism in Stalin's Russia. What we did after the Great Depression was we didn't go either one of those directions, because the FDR administration got back to government of and for by the people through the integrity of the system. Because you can't have accountability in a system if you don't have integrity. If you don't have the right people in accountability, then you can't hold the bad guys to account. And what happens if you take the cops off the beat? The criminals take over. What happens if the cops become corrupt? I don't know if you've ever seen one of the scariest films I've ever seen, which was Denzel Washington in Training Day when he was a corrupt LA cop. But that's what we're talking about, guys. It's a free-for-all for the power players. The guys above the line have all the cards. They're stroking each other. They're basically aligned regardless of their ideology and the money that they're stealing from the system to basically bury you. And what are you going to do about it? All I know is that I've got the answers completely, full stop, and it's a television series called The Con. You can find it at www.thecontv.tv. Let me give you that to you again. www.thecon.tv. We're all getting played. And if you don't want to be a sucker anymore, you got to understand what the facts are, and they're all right there for the taking. Let me know if you want to talk downstream. I've got all the answers. Be well. I just made a promise to myself that I was going to find the answers.